Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of SuperCoach, mates. Well, the wait is over. Round one has finally uh, been and gone, which means that for the first time this year, our players have contributed to our total scores, and we all have a rank after round one, which I don't know about you, Thomas, but my rank is going a lot better than my AFL side at the minute. Obviously, both Collingwood and St Kilda had very disappointing losses on the weekend. But that's not what we're here for. We can drown our miseries another time. As per normal, I'm joined by Thomas. How are you going, Thomas? How was your trip to the MCG on Sunday?
Yeah, definitely frustrating. It was a bloody NBA shootout kind of style game, but we didn't get the chocolates. Yeah. Obviously, spending $7 million and then still being 0-2 is definitely frustrating. But I mean, it's not the end of the world. I think we're starting to put things together in place, and yeah, hopefully the tide start to turn. I'd rather hit rock bottom now than round 11, 12, absolutely shooting the bed. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But without further ado, as we said, if you need a listener from previous years gone by, we've slightly changed the structure of this and focusing more on our own teams. And obviously, we've got our community team, which actually did really well, which was more credit to you guys picking the right players. Because as I said, this community side is all based off your trades and everything's done via X. So if you want to be involved, keep up to date with that because we'll post basically any trade options, vice captain and captain's options based on what you vote for. And we'll go through, obviously, myself and Nath's team, and you guys in the comments can leave things about what you think would be relevant for trades and things like that. And hopefully you get a bit of a helping hand on your trades as well. But without further ado, we'll pop up the screen here. So we're going to go through all three teams. We're probably not going to go through all the players repetitively across all teams, but we'll try and cover all bases. So we'll start off with my side. Obviously, yeah, not the worst. Nathan beat me to the chase with a much better score than me, but 100 points clear. But I scored about 22.78, I think it was, which put me. I was surprised with how the overalls went because in years gone by, I think, a 2,300 score is pretty good. But yeah, obviously Bontempelli and the like went absolutely bananas. So yeah, like a 2,400 was on the cards for a few players. But yeah, 22.78 around the 30k mark at the moment. But I mean, it's round one. I had Butters as captain, which was definitely frustrating. So yeah, backline. Look, I think if you've got Nazaya, you probably want to trade him sooner rather than later. I just don't think I don't know. He's not conducive to good scores at the moment. He's getting tagged. He's getting thrown at full forward. I could do a whole episode complaining about what Ross is doing with him, but I think they're trying to break the tag a little bit, but I don't know whether he is beneficial to go back to halfback and, rotate between halfback and midfield. Hopefully that might help. But yeah, Sinclair's a big beneficiary of this because he basically dominates that halfback line. 123 from him was really, really impressive. Connor Rozee, 105 in a terrible loss for Port. I think they're going to be really scraping the barrel for wins here. 105, can't complain there. He looks to be back to his best, rotating between halfback and midfield. Jordan Clark was the one that, he was frustrating. He was a really late addition to my side. Essentially, I was posting updates on my team on Twitter for those of you who follow us, and I had Josh Dacos in there at times. I had Lockie Blackiston, which thank fuck I didn't go there. I had Archie Roberts, thank God I didn't go there. Jordan Clark was one I was tempted with, but having said that, Freo absolutely shit the bed against the Cats in that second half, and I think every person bar Sarong just did not score well. And Clark's one that I think if it's a bit of a red flag for those who are thinking of getting him in is he just, I guess the benefit for him is his ceiling is really high, so he doesn't get many sub 60 scores, but he just seems to be really frustrating at times when Freo don't do so well. So he's on thin ice at the moment. I'm obviously not going to trade him first up, but yeah, he's one to watch. Caleb Windsor played a lot of CBA, so yeah, that midfield spot's locked up for him. The 70 you take seems like Melbourne's kind of spread of SuperCoach scores was definitely frustrating. It was one that I think you got to watch out for. Gorn, if you have Gorn, well done, but like even he was on about 70 at 3/4 time and just had a massive last quarter to drag Melbourne over the line. Windsor's one that I'm going to keep an eye on. I think if he continues getting 70s to 80s, great. But if he starts popping out 40s to 50s, I think he's a trade. And then Jai Sarong, obviously, I didn't have Lockie Jarks on field. This is me feeling my team for next round. But Lockie Jarks on the bench. I lost about 30 points there with Sarong. And then Dan Houston, almost my man of the match. I think he's my star of the round. 132. I think there was a lot of discussion about how they were going to go with the Pies. And how, what's his face, Craig McRae was going to go with, where to play Dan Houston, things like that. And obviously they see him as a distributor now, and he's the main guy down there. He just looks elite down there with his scoring potential. He just sits basically as a loose behind the ball and just gets everything and mops up everything. He's a monopoly on kickouts between him and Josh Dacos, it seems like. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nathan, but it seems like, it seems him and Josh Dacos are sharing the pie there, and it's really has a positive effect on the scores. But that's how my backline went, which was nice. But how's your? I'm gonna do it by position, I reckon, Nathan. But how's your backline gone? This is your side, obviously.
Yeah, well, much like Thomas, I had Nasiah. I traded him out. I saw his break even this week is 201. So if you have picked Nasiah and you didn't get rid of him last week, hoping he'd bounce back, well, that's a disaster for you, because I think he's projected to go down about 40k this week, $45,000. So that's just a disaster. Yeah, Rosie. Again, I agree with Thomas's sentiments, and much like McCarthy next to him, when you lose by 10 goals, and you're still putting up those scores, I don't think you can really complain. Lockie Blackiston, I like the role that he has. He just unfortunately didn't score like a lot of those Essendon players. I think the bigger problem for Essendon, and they're being criticised for this for probably about the last 15 seasons, to be honest, is I think defensively there's a lot of holes at Essendon. And I think the way that the AFL's going in 2026, I think they could be on the end of some pastings unless they can fix up this defensive profile that they've currently got, which is, just for those of you who don't know, it is currently not great, although there's only been one game. Sam Grill, Jai Sarong, Josh Lindsay, and Jake's are the four rookies I've got. I can't really complain about all of them. I was a bit hesitant about picking Sarong, but I saw that he got picked for opening round, so I chucked him in there, and I was happy that he held his spot. I think he's got a spot there in that Sydney side now. So yeah, I guess for me in the back line this week, I think it's probably more just going to be flicking around some rookies and just trying to get the right ones on the field, which at this time of the year is probably the biggest problem you've got with your rookies, is just figuring out which ones to put on the field. But yeah, I can't really complain too much about my defenders. I think Blackiston, look, the fact that a lot of those other guys around the same price, like Windsor, and I don't know what Kadeen Coleman scored, but a lot of them didn't really score much more than him. So I feel like in the long run, that could still be a good play, but time will tell on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think out of your backline, McCarthy, I think the downside with him is, I mean, we spoke about this brief. I think there's nothing wrong with the pick at the moment. There's going to be games that West Coast do better in. Gold Coast was a really tough matchup to start with. But yeah, I think because when he plays against those teams like a Gold Coast, like a top team like Sydney at the moment, he's going to get absolutely pumped in that midfield, and how many points is going to be taken away from him just because they get absolutely beaten around the ball is my concern. Whereas that half back role that he used to have, I guess, is more conducive for better Supercoach scoring. Blackiston's another one that I know a lot of players decided to hop on. He looked okay. I mean, Essendon got absolutely pummeled. He started really well and then faded very quickly. He's obviously a makeshift ruck with Brian, Nick Bryan coming back, and obviously Draper leaving. So I think it's a safer pick for now. But yeah, like my toss up was between him and Windsor. And Windsor won out for me. So yeah, like pretty similar score, 8 points in it. You can't really complain. But yeah, nice, solid team, Nathan. I think, yeah, a lot of players, very similar structure. Sam Gridge, whatever his name, Grill,
Yeah,
looks
Grill.
really solid. Yeah, Grill looks really solid in that Richmond lineup. I think he's one that you must have almost on field, just because, yeah, he just has a really solid halfback role, takes some kickouts as well. Looks very good by foot as well. But the other side, obviously, is our what do you call it? Community side. Yeah, it's very, very similar team setup. I'm just making sure I haven't got the almost a double up. Yeah, it's this community side here. So yeah, Sinclair was one that we changed from the Naz pick, exactly the same as what Nathan mentioned with the reason why. Rosie Windsor, Lindsay Sarong, Jacques. So this one was more Josh Dacos was there. I've just taken him out because he's got his bye. Josh Dacos was our D3, 94 solid. I think he's going to get, him and Houston, I think, are going to be really good SuperCoach picks regardless, just because of the roles they play. Look, I think the back line seems to have some most solid defensive picks. Sam Grill, obviously, in the midfield for us there, but Lindsay's going to get enough of the ball, I think, at West Coast. This is where I think this half back line stuff suits someone like McCarthy a bit better. But yeah, 61. Jai Sarong is a really good player for Sydney. I think he's really solid, and Lockie Jarks looks right at home in the Dogs set up there. Selwood seems to be the one that is playing a little bit more lockdown with his height. He was one that I think we just got in because we needed an extra spot, and was playing, but I don't think he'll be an on-position fielder anytime soon. He'll just make that, hopefully make a bit of cash with that 70 already in the cycle. But yeah, very similar defense and a very good score out of it. I think we scored with the community team about 2360 or something like that, which put us in the top 6K, which is a good start for the community team as well. But Nath, we'll go
2369 it was a
that
community
was
team.
solid score. So we'll go into snake order. How's your midfield looking? Because you did better than me, because I fucking had Butters as captain, but you just definitely nailed it with Bontempelli.
Yeah, well, it always helps when you have the highest player of the round as your captain. So that was a great start for me. Yeah, unfortunately, I also have Butters as well. I'm not too bothered. Port Adelaide got smacked out of the midfield. I've got some stats behind the scenes, which I don't know if you've seen, Thomas, which would probably support that midfield had a down day. Nick Dacos, again, what more can I say? I guess the only thing is probably fixing up his disposal efficiency's been a bit down. There are factors for that. Again, I'll refer to the stats. I don't have them obviously on screen, but I do have them on my computer. The fourth player in this has caused me an absolute world of pain, being Errol Gordon. So I basically did few last minute changes and changed my entire side to get this guy in. And now he's out for basically 16 weeks or 4 months. So that's just a devastating blow. So I think I will be one of the 12,000 teams who have traded in Caleb Sarong this week after his 150 against Geelong. So I think that will be the logical one. The two Essendon guys, can't complain about them. I think Parrish. I think if you haven't got Parrish, you're already behind the 8 ball. And Dyson Sharp, I think, is going to play a lot of games at Essendon this year. He looks settled. He's a bigger body. He's ready made. So yeah, Jaeger Smith, again, like I said last time, if you don't have Jaeger Smith, you've been living under a rock. You're already behind the 8 ball. Blamirez, he did all right for his first game. Bit of a late inclusion, but he did all right. Jack Carroll, so I don't know if you stuck with Jack Carroll, Thomas, but I did. I don't know. I would like his scoring to be a bit higher considering his role off halfback. But I'll take the 59. Watkins, again, first game, not really too bothered. I think that 45, was probably pretty good. And then the surprise pack of the week, I think, for a lot of people, was Milan Murdoch, who literally was in my side on Friday night. Once it got named, wasn't expecting much from him, and then he went out and scored 110. It's just a
You got
shame I
him.
didn't have him on the field.
Oh shit! Yeah, you got him. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Um, so the only thing I will say this week, though, I know we're not really talking about trades, but please don't trade him in this week, expecting him to score 110
No,
again.
yeah.
There's a very famous SuperCoach story for those of you who've been around long term. It's called the Josh Glenn rule. So about 11 years ago, a Gold Coast Suns player called Josh Glenn came in, made 100 on his debut. Everyone jumped on him, and then his second game, I think he scored 4, got injured, and was out for about 3 months afterwards. So don't trade him in until he's played his third game or until he's been named to play his third game. Because if he gets injured next week or he gets dropped in week 3 or something like that, and you bring him in, you're just wasting a trade. I know he's 99,000, but please just give him one more week and then bring him in because his break even will be ridiculously low. I'm not expecting 110 every week. I definitely wasn't expecting that this week. So yes, just hang on another week unless you absolutely just have to get rid of a rookie. But even then, I would probably prefer to get someone who's played or someone who's playing their third game. But yes, otherwise, other than having Murdoch on the bench, my midfield actually did quite well on the weekend. I think it did a lot better than yours, Thomas.
Yeah, we'll flip back to mine before we go back on the community side. So, yeah, my midfield didn't have Bontempelli. So, this is what I was toying up with, and this is what was frustrating. So, I had the likes of, this Clark position really screwed me over, which is frustrating as. So, I could have gone down 100K. I mean, McKirch was the other one, so he didn't do much better. But yeah, Josh Worrell was about 487, which is one I really toyed with, which would have potentially got me up to Richards to Bont. But yeah, essentially I got 100K out of the Bontempelli Richards, which I don't know. Look, down the track, who knows what happens? Because Richards went 144 round one, so it's tosses and turns. The really frustrating one was Butters with the 94. He got tagged, unfortunately. Look, he was on about 60 at 3/4 time with Port being smashed, so it was a lot better achievement, I think, to get to a 94, which shows what Butters is capable of. Nick Dacos, 126. Look, he's one that is really, really interesting. It'd be interesting to see your thoughts, Nathan, on it, because, yeah, he just seems to get way, like, a lot of the pill, but doesn't score hugely at the moment. Like, he scored about 117 with about 40 disposals against St Kilda last week, and then 126. Look, it's not bad. It's obviously very, very good, but you'd want, those 130 and 40 to be rewarded for his efforts, I think, when, you look at the devil's advocate play and see, look, if he does get tagged or he does have a down game, how that impacts his score. But for now, he's a shoe-in for captaincy positions each week. Ed Richards, look, I didn't watch that GWS game, so I didn't really see what was with him, but a lot of Dogs players are doing really, really well at the moment. A 90, look, we'll take it, move on. If he keeps pumping out these low 90s to 100s, then there's a bit of a concern, but we all know he's very, very capable of pumping out a 140, 150. Bont has a very good history against the Giants, so he was always going to pop off at some point. But Richards, yeah, I think he's very capable of scoring very well as well. Sammy Walsh, another classic Sam Walsh game. I like the pick just because of Carlton's cushy run, as much as they almost fucked it up against Richmond. 96, look, I didn't remember VC just in case he popped off, and he didn't. I was always pretty much set on Butters as captain regardless. Walsh, yeah, look, he's got the bye now, which is a little bit frustrating because I've got Bruin, Walsh, and Jagger Smith and Dacos all on the bye, so I'll probably cop a 0. I mean, it's best 18, so it's not the end of the world. But Sammy Walsh, yeah, he's one that, as a buyer's beware kind of thing, you've got to be careful that he is very capable of getting these shit scores, which is definitely not shit, but those not 140s, 150s, what we want out of Sammy Walsh, what he's capable of with the amount of possessions he gets. He doesn't use it that well, but 96, yeah, okay, get Parrish. Look, very average on the eye test, but 93, 100% take at his price. Look, we all know what he's capable of. Very good possession getter, and I think that's what's going to save him. Caniglio was one that I probably got sucked into his first round score. It was between him and Young, but Young didn't do much better. I think he started really, really well and then absolutely faded, and is about 60k cheaper. So I'll hold on to Cogs one more week. He plays St Kilda, who's very super coach friendly for their opposition. So I think I'll see how he goes. Look, he plays a high half forward role and pushes the midfield, which is doesn't really scream good super coach points, but he does the role really well. And I think his floor is gonna be reflective of that. I don't think we're going to see too many terrible scores off Cogs, but not too many high scores as well. Tanner Bruin, superstar. I think really good role for him. He gets a lot of possessions, and look, I think you got to get him in at some point post by. Jagger Smith, look, if you don't have him, you're crazy. I think you need to have him on field. He averages like a premium. And unless he's injured, he's a lock-in. And Dyson Sharp, Jack Carroll, Blameries. Blameries is actually a really good player, it seems like. He seems like he scores accordingly. Look, he's probably even a safe M8 pick if you go on a bit lighter in your midfield. Jack Carroll, he's one to be wary of just because he could get dropped. I think there's having obviously in supporter groups on Facebook and whatnot. It seems like his name's on the chopping board. He looked okay for me. He just bobs up at the right times. But to give you a bit of context, Liam Stocker was the one that was essentially dropped for him. Hunter Clark's there as well, so he's one that could get easily rotated through because he plays that half-back role, which we got a few of. And then Sharp was, didn't get much game time at all, but scored pretty well for what he got. I know I was listening to the Down Does Footy podcast this morning, driving to work, and they were saying that apparently his dad had a pot shot at what's his face at Chris Brad Scott about basically not letting his son play more game time. So who knows what that means, but yeah, it just seems a little bit like that Elijah Sardis 2.0 where he doesn't get much game time and we stuck with the shit rookie. But we'll talk about some rookies to trade in later. That could be a side swap. But that's how my midfield went. Nathan obviously nailed the captaincy pick, and I obviously suffered because I didn't have Bont. But hopefully the tables will be turned next week. But yeah, obviously our midfield for our what do you call it? Our
community team.
Yeah, community team did pretty well. Very similar setup. We did stick with Bontempelli. Obviously, didn't have the captaincy on him. As I said, the captaincy is purely based on what you vote on. And Butters and Anderson were the top two. So essentially, what we'll do is we'll put it out each week, and the highest poll getter gets captaincy and then vice, unless if they play in reverse order. So obviously, the vice is the guy that plays earlier. Look, I like Anderson's pick. I think he's going to be a really solid player. There's probably a little bit of an issue if he does get tagged, but he is a runner, so he seems to just get away from it very easily. Obviously, Bontempelli, not much has to be said. Everyone was saying that, you're in trouble because what happens if, you lose 100K from him and you basically save that elsewhere. I don't think he's going to drop much at all. He's just superstar in the making. Look, we're not going to see a 160 each week. He did tail up on Giants, but we're going to see probably a lot of 130 scores. Dacos, Bruin, Parrish, Cogs, we've all talked about. Grill in our midfield probably stays there. Carroll's one that I think, would be just one to watch for this week if he gets dropped. I wouldn't say trade him if he does, because I think he could easily come back in, but he's one that is a very rotatable spot, that's for sure. But let's move on to our rucks for now, because, I'd say there's a lot of changes in that. We all had different ruck setups. I know Nathan went to 2 premiums, but how did you go, Nath? Because your rucks definitely dominated, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I was just watching like Jackson in that game, and I'm like, this guy. I said all summer, I think this guy has the potential to be, not just a top ruckman, but one of the top players across the whole across the whole super coach. And there was every indication of that on Saturday when he wasn't rucking. He was basically another midfielder. Virtually the only guy who could possibly ever tag him is Mark Blitzovs, because no one else has that height or strength to go with him. So he was just bulldozing his way through the midfield. So again, I said this, earlier on in the season. I said I feel like if you haven't got Jackson, I think you're probably gonna have to bring him in at some stage. And Saturday definitely vindicated my reasoning for that. Tom De Koning, look, I was ballsy enough to go with the pick. I'm not going to trade him out. I think I've got other issues on there. But the fact that there's now 40 trades instead of the 30 like it used to be means that, if I get the rest of the side done, and he's still sort of averaging around this 90 mark, which I'm hoping goes up as he gets more used to St Kilda and the way that they play. Yeah, I'm gonna stick fat with him and McAndrew. I know some people ended up going McAndrew R2, and if you did, I'm gonna say well done, because I think he is Adelaide's number one ruckman going forward. I don't know if you guys saw that game on Saturday night, but he basically tore Darcy Cameron apart in the middle of the ground. It's just his height. He's got great tap work, so I think Adelaide had like 16 hit outs to advantage on the weekend, which is just ridiculous. Um, so yes, McAndrew is definitely in Adelaide's best side, and unless he gets injured, I think it's his spot to lose. So yeah, I wasn't ballsy enough to pick McAndrew at R2. I probably don't regret it in the long run. But yeah, time will tell with that. If McAndrew keeps going, perhaps I might even move to Conning out for a rookie and just put McAndrew at R2 anyway. But yeah, ruck line, I think it's going well enough. Yeah, I think I think the ruck's a pretty good spot, I reckon.
Yeah, Rocks. I mean, DeConning was one I was toying up with because he is 100k cheaper than the next best tier. Look, from a St Kilda perspective, he actually looked probably better than Gone in the first three quarters and was about on 80 points anyway at three-quarter time. He just got absolutely towed up against Gone in the last. Having said that, it was found out today that he was actually battling a virus leading up to the game, so it was a very last-minute fitness test to get him to play. He was basically saying that he didn't want the media to find out because he didn't want excuses to be put on him saying, oh, this is an excuse for playing poorly in the last quarter, but it probably explains why he gassed out by about three-quarter time. He's also not very used to playing in that sole ruck position, I think, because he played with Pitney for such a long time, and we all know how talented he is singularly, but I think we're going to see the best of DeConning very, very soon. He just, the way he leaps and his athletic ability for tap outs to advantage, I don't care what anyone says. I think he's going to be a big asset for our hit outs to advantage, and I think we're going to see those 120s and 130s very soon because, I think the only one thing to be careful of is that split with Marshall. I think that's probably going to limit his ceiling a fair bit because we saw last week against Collingwood, he still scored sub 100. So you just got to be careful a little bit because we were all hoping for a great score with DeConning as I saw ruck this week. But it's one to keep an eye on. And then moving on to my ruck line, I didn't have Jackson, but I had Tim English, which, was very, very impressive. I think his game time wasn't amazing from all reports, but 127. I think him and Jackson are in that very similar ilk that they're going to score very well with this new rule. I think the rule very much suits those athletic ruckmen that can get around the ground and be quite athletic in that ruck craft, and I think that's going to garner them a few free kicks as well. McAndrew, I think Nathan nailed in the head. I was at the game as well on Saturday night, and I didn't realize how tall the guy was. He dominated.
No, neither did I.
Test, and he just 1 foot jump, tapped it straight to advantage, and he looks pretty composed, ball in hand as well. So I think we're going to see good scores out of him as a rookie, and I think, as we talked about last week, when you have those rookie rucks that are very, very good money makers, it's best to have him almost on field because of their scoring potential. Like if you look at him at 119k compared to, I don't know, say, Lockie Jarks also scored 80, but say Jai Sarong, they're basically the same price. McAndrew scores 30 points in the clear. So, you'd rather have him compared to an R3, but having said that, if you went the Jackson and English route, which I know a lot of people did, then, you'd probably take that anyway. Mitch Edwards, my R3, I ended up trading him instead of Zabaletsky, I think his name is, whatever he's. Yeah, Zakaletsky, just because of potential job security. Zakaletsky scored a bit better, but R3 is not a big deal. Both of them didn't have the forward ruck DPP that I wanted. I mean, Zakaletsky has a ruck defense, which could be helpful, but I don't know how his job security is longer term. And then moving on to our ruck line for our community side, yeah, Jackson was the standout. Look, just a warning, he did play Geelong, who basically played Edwards as their main ruck. You're not going to see 142 consistently. I think it'll be really dependent on how the ruck line goes. But having said that, Jackson as a sole ruck is really, really impressive. Well, as the key ruck focus. And he does play midfield if he doesn't ruck, which is good. And McAndrew also has a R2. But finishing off with our forward line before we talk quickly about trades, because as we said, I don't think there's going to be too many heavy trades, except, unless you have Errol Goulden. What are your thoughts on the forward line, Nath? Because you had a pretty good forward line, I'd say. You got the Dev Robertson pick nailed, but what are your thoughts on your forward line?
Yeah, well, Harry Sheasel, I think he was a bit shaky in my side at times, but I'm glad I stuck with him. I think if North Melbourne are to, get out of that bottom three, bottom four, where they've basically lived for the last, a little bit more than a decade and a half, or half a decade now. I think it's going to be guys like Sheasel who are going to get them out of that. So not only you have the captaincy on the number one score of the week, but then you have the vice captaincy on the second highest score of the week. Just add some cream onto the cake. I've had Petrarca all summer. I didn't get sucked into, a Pickett. I did have Darcy in there at one stage, but I think my heart was always set on Christian Petrarca. I felt like he'd have a bounce back year at the Suns, and I wasn't expecting to see 2 games in he'd be averaging 161 and being on top of the AFL Coaches Associations with a perfect 20 votes. So that was definitely a surprise. I think his break even this week is minus 26, which for someone at his price is just ridiculous. So if you haven't got him, you need to get him in. I don't think he'll be this cheap again based on how he's played. Flanders, I think that's probably more what most people are expecting from Flanders. Lawler, look, he was impactful. Attended a good amount of CBAs, which I was happy about. I think he's a bit like Blackiston. I think he's got a good role. I think I'm just mindful of the fact that, this Richmond side are quite young and, they might cop a few smashings along the way. Philippou, I am very frustrated with Mateus Philippou. I don't know what to do with him this week. His break even is 2. So I think he will go up in price. I just don't know whether or not I'm going to hold him this week and move him on next week for, someone like a Todd Marshall or someone like that. I haven't decided what to do yet there with Philippou. Devon Robertson, it was basically between him and Lombard for that F6 role on the field. Obviously happy I chose Robertson. As I said, I think normally I am quite hesitant with picking the 119k rookies who've come from other clubs because they haven't been able to get a game. But I felt like Robertson was always different, and I think the showing on Sunday night sort of highlighted that. Lombard, I can't complain with the pick. He's going to make money. I think he's pretty settled in that Gold Coast side. And then Al Akshar was a very late pickup. He basically got picked when he got named. Not expecting a great deal from him. I don't think he's going to be a long-term option for Essendon. I think he's probably going to, play 3 or 4 games and get dropped. I'm hoping he plays the 3rd game, just so at least he can make a little bit of money. And then since we're on there, I'll just quickly talk about it. So Degoe is a flex player. I was a little bit frustrated just watching him rot away in the forward line when our midfield was basically getting dominated. I think he could have made a real impact there with his body and his physique in that midfield. So, look, as I said, I'm not going to... I think I've got bigger issues than Degoe. He was always one that I sort of picked knowing that he might put up these scores, which I guess is the advantage of a flex player for someone like him, because if he doesn't score well, his scores don't count, and if he goes gangbusters, which he can have a habit of doing, well, then you reap the rewards of those big scores. So, in my opinion, I think he's a perfect flex player just for that reason, because you don't necessarily need him, but when he does score, he scores quite big. So, yeah, that was sort of the rundown for my side on the weekend. So I think, yeah, my 23.45, which I got, I think was quite happy. I think I'm in the top 10,000.
Yep.
Not sure how long that's going to stay for, but yeah, time will tell on that.
Yeah, I mean, De Gea is probably the frustrating one at 300k. We all know what he's capable of, but I think that was the risk with when Collingwood don't do so well, and De Gea is probably the first one that really struggles. Alachka, yeah, he's one that look, he probably want Marshall there instead, but Philippou's an easy trade. We'll talk about trades in a minute with a few that are available. But yeah, Alachka could be just a slow burn. He looked okay, he looked lively, but yeah, was never going to be a high point getter, that's for sure. Moving on to my side quickly, yeah, forward line very very similar. I think a lot of forward lines are going to be quite similar. I went Cheese or Petrarca Flanders. I didn't actually realise I traded out Pickett because of that family issue that he potentially was going to miss, and he ended up playing. I didn't realise until literally the centre bounce. When they were warming up on Sunday when I was at the game, I didn't pay much attention to that team sheet, which was my bad. But I don't think he scored that well anyway. And that goes back to how Melbourne seem to be spreading the ball a lot more than last season. But yeah, Petrarca, if you don't have him, get him this week. I think it doesn't matter if you wait 1 week. I think he's just missing on these huge scores. He looks back to his best. Flanders, the 104 is what we wanted to see. I think he's going to be, as he grows confidence in that midfield and kind of get used to how St Kilda plays, and I think he's going to be better for it. Buderick was my kind of pod leading into preseason. He looked okay. I don't think we're going to see these hundreds as consistently, but 73 to 90 probably is what we're going to see from Buderick if he plays that halfback role consistently and doesn't get flipped around by Bevo. Philippou, look, I think there's big red flags. He's almost one that I think people got suckered into this year. I mean, 168k, sure, is not the end of the world because of what he's capable of, but it seems like his body's just injury prone at the moment. He seems to get these soft tissues injury all the time. I think he's still going to grow into that midfield spot. He's still young, like he's still, 19, 20, whatever. He was a bottom age recruit when we picked him up. So there's a lot to learn in that midfield mix. And I think it's another layer where Naz is getting tagged as one that puts more pressure on the other midfielders. Having said that, he's almost my number one trade out this week ahead of anyone else, just because I think, yeah, it just seems the more I watch him specifically to SuperCoach, it seems like that he's a high impact player and not really a high points player. Todd Marshall, look, he seems to be, from all news reports, he had that ankle injury I think he's sustained against North. Look, he seems to be okay. 90, I think you got to get him in. Plays that interceptor role. Look, won't play North every week, but even though they got battered, I think he's going to see a lot of ball down there. And then Leo Lombard, Dev Robertson was one which was frustrating that I did have in my starting lineup. He looks really impressive for West Coast. He's almost a starter in F5, F6 position, just with his tackle pressure playing, wing and getting enough numbers there, and the ball's going to come through him enough. And obviously, Grill is my flex position at the moment. Look, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But before we talk about trades and maybe some vice captaincy options, the community team, look, yeah, very similar. Laylor was looking in really dicey areas against Carlton early days before he kicked those 3 goals. He's similar in that Philippou, Dusty Martin role where they're high impact players. Look, you take a 75 every day of the week at his price point, better than a Treloar and Co. And look, he's going to only grow in that midfield role. He only started playing that this year. Also had Buderick as well. Look, I could easily trade out a Laylor if it goes down to shit, or Buderick as well, because I got Marshall there and Philippou, who will quickly be traded to someone else. And Leo Lombard in my flex, which probably should have been Marshall, which would have even been a better score. So, yeah, can't complain. But we'll talk about trades now. And there's obviously Nathan pointed out very acutely that you got to be careful with your trades because, yes, there are rookies that scored well that not a lot of people have. And, well done and props to you if you did get them in your starting lineup. But who's on your radar at the moment? We'll flip back to your team, Nathan. But yeah, who's on your radar? Because you've obviously got the Errol Goulden situation to worry about as well. That's a must trade out because he's obviously out for 3 to 4 months. And who are you thinking of bringing in?
Yeah, so I've had a look at some options. So I've got whatever Errol Gordon is. So I've got 566,000, and then I've got another sort of 15,000 on top of that. So I've got about $583,000.
Yeah.
So I can basically afford anyone below. I can basically afford anyone below Tuke Miller. So there's some names. So Zach Merritt would probably be the point of difference way to go. I just don't think having three Essendon plays in the same line is probably gonna work for me. Lockie Neal, I don't know about. I think there's some concerns with Brisbane defensively. So I don't know sort of what Lockie's going to do there. I think Caleb Sarong's the obvious one. As I touched on already, 12,000 people have already brought him in this week. I suspect a lot of them are Golden owners like myself. So yeah, there's a few other names here. There's Taranto, there's LDU, Newcomb, but I'm not really sure if any of them are going to be that top, tier of midfielders. So I guess for me, it's probably looking like either Sarong or if I trade out Philippou as well and go down to say a Marshall and get another 20 odd K, that'll put me up to it just over that 600K mark. I could probably get Ed Richardson or Finn Callaghan. I think the one I'd like is John Dawson at Adelaide. I just don't think I'm going to have enough for him. So yeah, I think for me, it's probably either going to be Richards or Callaghan, or if I don't trade out Philippou this week, then I'll probably stick to Sarong, which is currently who I've got in the side.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the price list on the other screen here. Yeah, look, Max Holmes 141 as well, crazy score. Look, he's one that's flying under the radar at 600K. Could be a good point of difference after his buy. I probably wouldn't pick up any Dogs plays because they've got their buy coming up. Yeah, Richard Libba seems to be playing off halfback, pushing the midfield. But I'd rather Ed Richards over Libba. Callaghan looks really, really impressive. Goal scoring mid, very pottish. Plays St Kilda, I could see him go big. However, Windhager probably goes to him. So that's a tag threat. I probably wouldn't go George Hewitt or Dawson's an interesting one. 91 didn't look amazing against the Pies. Seems to play flipped around a little bit in that traditional kind of half forward midfield swap where he tries to get sent forward to score goals. Noah Anderson, I think, is one that if you are potentially wanting to trade, he's got Richmond coming up, could go bananas against him. But if you're looking at that price point around that Goulden mark, Sarong's, I think, the obvious option. I probably wouldn't go anyone else off the top of the bat. Tim Taranto, 107, but yeah, injury prone as anything. Luke Davis-Uniacke, if you want to go brave, plays West Coast coming up, doesn't have a bye, could go big, but his ceiling's just not there with his butchering of the ball. Caleb Strong. I know on Twitter, I think it was Ben at SC360 on Twitter, posted something about basically saying a similar thing with Sarong as a trade. I'd just be wary, like, for sure get him. He's a very good pick, but I owned him all of last season, and the one big frustrating thing with Sarong was his inability to hit that ceiling consistently. He had a history of going bananas early days. Like, if you look at his score, I'm just going to bring it up quickly before we wrap it up. Caleb Sarong. I bring up his early scores from 2025. Had a very similar setup where the early rounds, didn't hit straps onto round 3, but 102, 99, 105, 142, 103. So he goes on strings of runs and then can get quiet. He was on about 70 at 3/4 time and then busted at a 70 point or 80 point last quarter. So he's very capable. He's in that Butters ilk where he can score very big, very quickly, which I just think could benefit. But you look at Brayshaw, he's got a 47 and I don't know if he was tagged out of it or not, but you got to be careful with those Freo mids because it's a bit of a Russian roulette with who gets tagged between the two. Brayshaw maybe a bit more with his ability to hit both defensively and offensively. But Sarong, I think, is probably the obvious pick if you're strapped for cash. Like I'd go, if you had money, I'd probably go to the 600,000 plus options. But if you're stuck with about 20,000 in the bank, then probably, Sarong's the obvious pick there. But before we wrap it up, there's probably not any other big trades I'd be looking at. Main one being Phillip, who I think if that injury comes out that he's missing 2 to 3 weeks, look, I'd probably give him one more week if he plays. But if he doesn't, I'd trade. There's two options off the bat. Lockie Cook from the Adelaide Crows, I believe, is a mid forward. 158. He scored a 92.
Yeah, Braden Cook, yeah.
Braden Cook, sorry. He's playing a half forward role. Looked really, really solid. I think he's one that you can bring in. And also, as Nathan already has him, what's his face? Milan Murdoch looked really solid. Didn't know much about him, but he seemed to be really solid in that game. And even though they got battered, it's conducive to Supercoach scoring. So I think, you look at those two rookies in particular, and probably Nathan as an example of Todd Marshall. Just wait a week unless, you need to trade for injury purposes or for whatever reason you don't have enough to do best 18. Be a little bit careful with that because the last thing you want to do, for example, hypothetically speaking, Phillip who plays and you trade him because he scored that 27, he goes out and scores 100, and you bring in a Braden Cook and he doesn't score well at all and then gets dropped the following week. So that's worst case scenario, as Nathan mentioned prior.
Yeah, the Josh Glenn rule.
Yeah, exactly. So just be a little bit careful with that. But that's what we got time for today. We'll talk about, I'll post up. We'll probably, if these videos don't push an hour, we'll probably include vice captaincies and captaincies this week, but we'll also post a weekly vice captaincy and captaincy options on our Twitter page. So make sure you follow that. We'll leave the links down in the comments below when this gets released. And that'll give you an opportunity to pick the community sides, VC and C. But also we'll give our 2 cents worth on the captaincy and vice captaincy then.
I'll just say now, I've gone Bond vice captain, Butters captain. I'm just saying that's going to be my setup for the week.
Yeah, no, it's smart, man. I think it's a lot of people are going to follow that very quickly. But other than that, have a good rest of your week. Hopefully, if you do trade, it goes your way, and we'll catch you for the start of round or the end of round 2.